Faculty of Medicine Universitas Airlangga can reach a great level in Asia and in the world.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 103rd Airlangga webinar conference series entitled How to Boost Your Endurance. My name is Dr. Kenneth Denner Agus, along with my senior, Dr. Ahmad Heriana, specialist of pediatrics, and my colleagues, Dr. Sakarisa, Arya, Kevin, Winner, Rahul, and David. We are the organizing committee members of this afternoon's webinar. This webinar is organized by the Faculty of Medicine Universitas Airlangga, Surabaya. Before we proceed to the main event, we will announce some of the rules regarding the certification and the Q&A session of this webinar. For the rules for e-certificate. First, full participation during the webinar is required. Second, your attendance will be recorded by the Zoom application. Third, by the end of this webinar, participants are required to fill a questionnaire, which the committee will send the link of in the chat box. And fourth, the certificate will be sent to your registered email address. Next, for the rules for Q&A. First, use the Q&A box on the middle of your Zoom panel to write down your questions. And second, questions will be sorted and discussed after all lectures have presented. Thank you for your participation, and we sincerely hope you enjoy this webinar. We will start this event with an opening remark from our beloved host, Dr. Sundari Indah Wiyasihati, Magister Science. Dr. Sundari, the time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to the Secretary of Department of Medical Physiology and Biochemistry, Faculty of Medicine Universitas Airlangga, Irviansa Iwadi Doctor, Master of Science, the Head of Sport Health Science Master Program, the Faculty of Medicine Universitas Airlangga, Professor Bambang Purwanto, Doctor, Magister of Health, Associate Professor Yarek Maistu, PhD, and Professor Yakuri Mai, PhD, together with us today. Our honorable panelists, Dr. Lili Herawati, Dr. Purwosio Jeki, and Dr. Dwi Cahyo Kartiko, and all the respectable participants of today's webinar. My name is Sundari Indah Wiyasihati. I'm the Master of Ceremony for today's webinar. On behalf of the Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga, I am pleased to welcome all of you to our webinar. The 103rd Airlangga webinar conference series on how to boost your endurance, organized by the Sport Health Science Master Program. Allow me to explain the rundown for today's webinar briefly. First, the opening ceremony with the national anthem, the hymn of Universitas Airlangga, and the profile of the organizer. And then we will invite Dr. Irviansa for the opening speech, followed by a group photo. And then we will proceed to our main session with Dr. Adgarini as the moderator. And then last, we'll have the closing remark. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start our program with the national anthem Indonesia Raya, followed by the hymn Airlangga. Okay, next we will proceed with a brief profile of the Sport Health Science Master Programs as today's organizer.
Magister Ilmu Kesehatan Olahraga unggul dalam, dosen pengajar berkompeten dan ahli di bidangnya. Fasilitas perkuliahan, penelitian, dan komunitas yang mendukung. Kami tunggu lulusan S1 dan D4 bidang sains, olahraga, dan kesehatan. Mari bergabung bersama kami untuk menjadi akademisi, praktisi, dan peneliti di bidang kesehatan olahraga di program studi Magister Ilmu Kesehatan Olahraga Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Airlangga, Surabaya.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may we request the Secretary of the Department of Medical Physiology and Biochemistry, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Irviansa Irwadi, Master of Science, to deliver his opening speech.
Thank you, Dr. Sundari. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirrabbilalamin. Allahumma sholli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. It is an honor for me to speak on behalf of the Medical Physiology and Biochemistry Department, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga. Allow me to welcome you to the Airlangga webinar conference series with the title How to Push Your Endurance. Before we start, I would like to deliver my gratitude to the Dean of Medical Faculty Universitas Airlangga, Profesor Dr. Budi Santoso, Dr. Spesialis Obstetri Ginekologi Konsultan, and Dr. Asra Ali Fauzi, Dr. Spesialis Bedah Saraf Konsultan, and also all the AWCS team, as well as all the members of the committee. We could not have done it without their support. Special thanks to our distinguished speaker, Profesor Dr. Bambang Purwanto, Dr. Mkes, Professor of Physiology and Biochemistry Department, and also the Director of the Sport Health Science Master Study Program. And then Associate Professor Jarek Maestu, PhD from University of Tartu, and Prof. Yak Yurime, PhD, Professor of University of Tartu. And also to all the panelists, Dr. Lili Herawati, Dr. Mkes from Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Purwosri Rejeki, Dr. Mkes from Universitas Airlangga, and Dr. Dwi Cahyo Kartiko, SPD Mkes, Universitas Negeri Surabaya. And the moderator, Dr. Laden Argarini, Dr. PhD. And thank you to our professor, senior college student, and all the participants for being part of this webinar. Master of Sport Health Science Study Program is currently evolving with the generation of lecturer and renewable curriculum, subsequent with the latest development in science and technology in the field of sport health science. This event is in part of effort to carry out scientific updates and to increase recognition, promotion, tracer study, staff and student inbound or outbound, as well as to enhance collaborative activities with the University of Tartu. Without any further, I will hand over to the host, Dr. Sundari. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfiansyah. Now we would like to invite the Dean of Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga, Professor Dr. Budi Santoso, Dr., Specialist Obstetrician and Gynecologist Consultant, to deliver his opening speech.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sundari as Master of Ceremony. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the distinguished speaker, Professor Jack Jurimai, PhD, University of Tartu, Estonia, Associate Professor Jarek Maestu, PhD, University of Tartu, Estonia, also Professor Dr. Bambang Purwanto, Dr. Master Kesehatan from Universitas Airlangga. The panelists, Dr. Gadis Mainarsari, Dr. Master Kesehatan, Dr. Purwosri Rejeki, Dr. Master Kesehatan, also Dr. Dwi Cahyo Kartiko, Spesialis Pendidikan, Sarjana Pendidikan, Master Kesehatan from Universitas Negeri Surabaya, Moderator Raden Argarini, also the senior staff, professor, student respective college, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to welcome you at Airlangga webinar conference series, How to Boost Your Endurance, which is held by Sport Health Science Study Program, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga. Secondly, I would like to thank to all speakers who are willing to share the ideas about sport endurance in this webinar. This webinar aims to provide the novel insight about endurance sport, internal training load as a marker for training monitoring in endurance sport, and the determination of internal training load. Moreover, this webinar also aims to increase faculty recognition, promotion, tracer study, collaboration, also staff and student inbound from the University of Tartu, Estonia. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga, I really appreciate this webinar. I really hope that this event can be strategic forum for all colleagues to update knowledge and insight expand network, which is certainly very useful for improving the quality of services, especially related to endurance sport. Thank you very much for your attention. Please enjoy the webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Budi Santoso. Please allow us to take a group photo together before we start our webinar today. Okay, let's take a photo together. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you. Now we are going to the main session with Dr. Argarini as the moderator for us today. Dr. Argarini is the staff of the Department of Medical Physiology and Biochemistry, Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga. She just finished her PhD at the University of Western Australia and currently is the adjunct lecturer at School of Human Sciences, Sports Sciences, Exercise and Health at the University of Western Australia. Her research mainly in cardiovascular. Dr. Argarini, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sundari, for very nice introductions. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are in healthy conditions. So first, I would love to welcome you all to this webinar, and thank you so much for joining with us today. This is the 103rd sessions of Airlangga Webinar Conference Series organized by Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga. And today, the topic of this webinar is about the endurance training. My name is Raden Argarini, and I'm also academic staff in Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga. And today, I'm really glad we already have 3 excellent speakers with us. So the first one is Professor Bambang Purwanto, Dr. Magister Kesehatan from Universitas Airlangga. And the other 2 speakers, Professor Jarek Maestu and also Professor Yak Yurime from Tartu University, Estonia. How are you? Professor Bambang and Professor Jarek and Professor Yak?
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you very much for asking. It's a great pleasure, and I'm feeling fine and
really glad pleasure for us too. You can join with the seminar. How's the weather in Estonia?
Thank you for inviting us to
the weather in Estonia. It's currently sunny, but it turned cold. Last week it was +30, but currently it's about 10 degrees above zero. So
it's really cold. Surabaya is usually in average is 33 degrees.
It's very hot.
Also very humid. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the normal weather for us. But yeah, so it's not raining and it's really sunny today. So it's
okay. Thank you, Professor Zarek, also Professor Yak, in our collaboration webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Budi Santoso. Prof. Budi Santoso is our dean in the Faculty of Medicine. Yeah. Okay, before we start, probably I just want to give a little bit information about the Q&A sessions for all the participants in here. So the Q&A sessions will be held after the last presentation from Professor Yurime. However, at the bottom of your screen, you can find Q&A box. So as our speaker go along with their presentations, you are free to post your questions over there. Without further ado, I think that I will introduce our first speaker, Professor Bambang Purwanto, Dr. Magister Kesehatan. Professor Bambang Purwanto is a professor in the Department of Medical Physiology and Biochemistry, and I think he's the one of the youngest professor in our Faculty of Medicines, and he has taught physiology at the Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Airlangga since 2006. And currently, he is the head of Master of Sports Sciences, Exercise and Health of Medical Faculty of Universitas Airlangga. His research interest is in developing new target molecule for diagnostic markers and therapy for people with diabetes and also for muscle damage. But also he has an interest in growth, maturation, and also long-term athlete development. And he has published there's a lot of articles in this area. And today, he will be talking about the axis of endurance. So without further ado, I will invite our first speaker, Professor Bambang Purwanto. Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Arga. Please allow me firstly to welcoming our distinguished lecturers, Professor Jared and Professor Ya from Tartu University. I will start the share screen. Okay. Okay. I will present the axis of endurance. This presentation will be delivered in two languages, in Indonesia and in English. Next slide, please. The endurance is an ability to perform a certain activity as long as possible. The endurance in performing high intensity activity is called with stamina. So this is a difference between the endurance and stamina. The endurance is the basis of stamina in sport, stated in duration of activity, time, minutes, seconds, or in VO2 max, in milliliter or kilogram per minute. It is like a fill in the bottle with water. More water filled in the bottle, then greater the capacity of the bottle. More water filled in the bottle, then longer in duration to fulfill the bottle. Jadi endurance itu adalah satu kemampuan performa fisik yang dinyatakan sebagai kemampuan untuk melaksanakan satu aktivitas tertentu selama mungkin. Sehingga kalau seseorang itu bisa melakukan suatu aktivitas dipertahankan selama mungkin, maka orang tersebut dikatakan endure. Nah, ketika seseorang itu melakukan aktivitas fisik itu dalam intensitas yang tinggi selama mungkin, maka endurance ini berubah nama menjadi stamina. Jadi stamina ini ada perbedaan yang mendasar dengan endurance. Endurance ini mirip dengan kalau kita kemudian mengisi air di dalam botol, kapasitas botol itu adalah endurance. Isi di dalam botol itu tidak menggambarkan seberapa endure seseorang. Ini yang kemudian sering kita salah pahami. Endurance itu adalah kapasitas, bukan volume. Nah, beberapa menggunakan ukuran endurance itu dalam waktu, bisa dalam menit, bisa dalam detik. Juga ada yang juga bisa dinyatakan dalam VO2 max. Nah, yang terakhir, yang VO2 max ini itu sering kita gunakan di dalam memprediksi performa endurance dari seorang atlet. Next slide, please. The endurance is resulted from the collaboration of function between respiration, cardiovascular, and muscles. The energy in ATP, the energy availability in ATP need to be supported by two components. The first one is oxygen. The second one is nutrients. The oxygens determined by the respiration and cardiovascular function. Respiration providing oxygen into the blood, and the cardiovascular deliver the oxygen to the muscles. And the nutrients, this is the function of the gastrointestinal system and the metabolic system. Respiration, cardiovascular, and muscle are connected in sequential in an axis. Muscle plays a key role in generating endurance as an effector and also executor. Inadequate muscle negates any oxygen and nutrient availability. Jadi yang dimaksud dengan endurance ini adalah sebetulnya merupakan hasil akhir dari kerjasama fungsi dari 3 sistem di dalam tubuh, yaitu respirasi, kardiovaskular, dan otot. Kerjasama ini dalam rangka untuk menyediakan energi yang dibutuhkan pada saat kita melakukan satu aktivitas yang kemudian kita sebut dengan ATP. Ya. Nah, ini bisa terwujud atas kerjasama atau supported dari 2 komponen, yaitu oksigen dan nutrien. Pada kesempatan ini kita hanya akan fokus pada ketersediaan oksigen yang didukung oleh 2 sistem, yaitu respirasi dan kardiovaskular. Respirasi, kardiovaskular, dan otot ini saling bekerja sama membentuk sebuah aksis yang berantai. Respirasi menyediakan oksigen, kardiovaskular mendelivernya kepada otot, lalu otot yang menggunakannya. Sehingga pada kesempatan ini saya menyampaikan bahwa otot ini yang menjadi peran kunci di dalam menentukan endurance seseorang. Dia sebagai efektor, juga sebagai eksekutor. Sebesar apapun kemampuan respirasi dan kardiovaskular seseorang, bila tidak ditunjang dengan otot yang performanya bagus, otot yang sesuai, maka oksigen yang sudah dideliver banyak sekali menuju ke otot itu tidak akan menghasilkan endurance yang signifikan. Next slide, please. So this is the endurance development in stages. I will present in 3 stages. The first one is the providing stages. These stages, the providing stages, start 0 to 6 years old. In first growth spurt and focusing in thorax cavity and muscle growth and development. At the end of the 6 years old, these providing stages could be determined by the sitting height and vital capacity. This is the individual potency in sport. The second stage is delivering stages. These start at 11 to 17 years. This is the stages of second growth spurt and focusing in cardio, growth, and development. At the end of 17 years old, we can determine these stages, the delivering stages, with the examination of blood pressure, heart rate, especially resting heart rate, and the hemoglobin. This one is the characteristic of the athlete candidates. At the end of the stages is the consuming stages, started at the 15 years old and focusing in muscles growth and development. At this stage, the consuming stage, it's already the individual potency developed in the athletes. The examination to determine the consuming stages is resting heart rate, hemoglobin, and VO2 max. Jadi perkembangan dan pertumbuhan endurance itu melewati 3 fase. Fase yang pertama adalah fase providing, di mana pada fase ini dimulai sejak usia 0 sampai 6 tahun, sangat dipengaruhi oleh pertumbuhan cepat yang pertama, di mana fokus pada providing ini adalah pertumbuhan dan perkembangan dari volume rongga toraks. Jadi sangat terkait dengan fungsi respirasi. Termasuk di dalamnya adalah perkembangan dari otot-otot bantu napas. Nah, bagaimana kita bisa tahu pada staging ini terjadi pertumbuhan dan perkembangan yang baik? Kita bisa melakukan pemeriksaan, yaitu 2. Pertama sitting height, ya, tinggi duduk, dan vital capacity. 2 indikator ini bisa digunakan untuk menilai potensi individual seseorang untuk menjadi seorang atlet. Yang kedua adalah stages yang delivering. Ya. Ini focusing pada pertumbuhan dan perkembangan kardio. Pada usia 11 sampai 17 tahun dipengaruhi oleh secondary growth spurt, di mana pada kondisi ini atlet yang semula masih potensi ini sudah bisa didetermine sebagai kandidat atlet. Nah, kita bisa menentukannya menggunakan indikator, yaitu antara lain blood pressure, tekanan darah, yaitu yang kedua adalah resting heart rate, dan hemoglobin. Yang ketiga adalah tahapan akhir, yaitu tahapan consuming, tahapan yang paling menentukan bagaimana potensi individu nanti kemudian berkembang betul menjadi seorang atlet. Ini dimulai sejak usia 15 tahun dan focusing pada pertumbuhan dan perkembangan otot. Ada 3 indikator utama yang kemudian kita bisa gunakan, yaitu resting heart rate, hemoglobin, dan VO2 max. Next slide, please. How to boost up our endurance? Yeah, it depends on the stages. The first one, yeah, to boost up our endurance, we have to upgrade the muscle function, the VO2 max. Yeah, there are 3 components to upgrade the muscle function. The first one is muscle mass, yeah, by resistance and weight training. The second one is how to suit our muscle in fiber typing, yeah. And the third one is the myoglobin level. The second one is to boost up the endurance, we should improve the cardiac function. The cardiac output is the main indicator for the cardiac function. There are 2 components to support the endurance boosting up. The first one is the eccentric hypertrophy by aerobic training, and the second one is effective in high cardiac output and the efficient cardiac by the low heart rate. And the third one is the improving on lung function, on vital capacity. Better vital capacity, better oxygen providing in our blood. So how to boost up our endurance? By the we have to have the big capacity of our chest, our thorax, and we have to make sure that the skeleton and muscle grow and develop in a proper way. Lung, vital capacity, parenchyma, and branching of the airway, it should not be interrupted. Jadi pada kondisi di mana ketika kita ingin meningkatkan endurance, ada 3 hal yang harus kita perhatikan. 3 hal ini harus menyesuaikan stages yang tadi sudah saya sampaikan. Yang pertama adalah bagaimana kemudian kita bisa mengupgrade otot. Yang pertama ini ada 3 yang kemudian menentukan. Nomor 1 adalah massa otot, yang kedua adalah fiber typing, dan yang ketiga adalah myoglobin. Ada yang saya tulis merah itu sebetulnya ada maknanya, bahwa kemudian yang ditulis merah itu sampai sekarang kita belum bisa melakukan intervensi model latihan ataupun bentuk intervensi tertentu yang bisa kemudian meningkatkan myoglobin atau menyesuaikan fiber typing, karena itu sudah ditentukan sejak awal secara genetik. Yang bisa kita lakukan adalah meningkatkan massa otot dengan meningkatkan latihan resisten dan latihan beban. Yang kedua adalah kita bisa melakukan upaya untuk memperbaiki fungsi dari jantung, ya, yaitu dengan membuat jantung ini mengalami hipertrofi yang eksentrik, ya. Salah satunya dengan aerobik training, sehingga jantung itu akan menjadi efektif dan efisien, memiliki cardiac output yang tinggi dan memiliki heart rate yang rendah. Dan yang ketiga adalah kita bisa memboosting up di endurance itu dengan meningkatkan fungsi paru, dalam hal ini adalah vital capacity. Ini juga sulit untuk kemudian kita lakukan intervensi karena sangat bergantung kepada growth and development dari atlet, terutama pada kapasitas toraks, ya, dan perkembangan otot bantu napas, serta juga bagaimana maturasi dari paru dan percabangan dari saluran napas. Ini menjadi kunci. Yang bisa kita lakukan adalah menjaga supaya kemudian growth and development pada kondisi ini itu tidak mengalami gangguan. Karena seringkali gangguan pada awal-awal, ya, 0 sampai 6 tahun itu akan menyebabkan kapasitas toraks, ya, dan kapasitas paru itu menjadi kecil. Yang sekarang ini menjadi isu penting di dalam pertumbuhan dan perkembangan anak Indonesia adalah adanya stunting, yang kemudian menyebabkan anak-anak Indonesia ke depan itu tidak memiliki endurance yang baik. Next slide, please. Ya. For the next, I will deliver. There are 3 don'ts to boost up our endurance. The first one, don't during childhood stage, don't limit activities and meals. Do not put any luggage on your back and do not sleep at late. The second one, during adolescence, do not give any compassion and be protective to our children. Do not sleep at late and limit the activity and meals. And during 15 years old more, please do not sleep at late and be protective and do not be mad to the coach. Jadi mengikuti 3 anjuran untuk bisa meningkatkan endurance, saya juga menyertakan 3 yang larangan yang harusnya diperhatikan supaya kemudian tidak mengganggu bagaimana kemudian kita ingin endurance ini bisa meningkat. Yang pertama adalah selama stages awal di usia anak itu jangan membatasi aktivitas dan jangan membatasi makan. Karena pada saat terjadinya growth spurt itu biasanya memang aktivitas meningkat dan kemudian selera makan, nafsu makan juga ikut meningkat. Yang kedua, sering kita temui anak-anak kita pada waktu sekolah ya, bawa tasnya berat dan diletakkan di punggung. Ini akan sangat mengganggu, terutama akan mengganggu pertumbuhan dan perkembangan dari kapasitas rongga dada. Dan tolong jangan kemudian membuat anak-anak kita ini tidur terlalu larut, supaya growth hormonnya itu bisa disekresi dan diproduksi dengan optimal. Selama masa remaja, tolong jangan kemudian memberikan jangan memberikan compassion, jangan sedikit-sedikit tidak boleh, sedikit-sedikit tidak boleh. Ya. Jadi anak-anak ini jangan dikasihani. Kalau di sekolahan ada kegiatan ini nanti capek, nggak boleh. Ya. Jadi mereka ini harus diberikan waktu dan ruang yang cukup untuk beraktivitas. Kalau ini dibatasi, justru kemudian nanti endurance-nya akan berkurang. Dan yang kedua adalah pada aktivitas di selama remaja ini juga jangan membatasi makan. Ya. Yang ketiga adalah di atas 15 tahun, tolong kemudian yang paling sering ini adalah jangan marah pada pelatih, karena setelah usia 15 tahun ini pelatih akan mulai memberikan porsi latihan yang lebih, terutama pada latihan beban dan latihan berat. Next slide, please. In this slide, I will tell you the talent management for the 6 years first. We have to focusing in can identify and the fiber typing and growth and development. This first 6 years determine the potency of the athlete candidate. We have to make sure that the type 1 muscle fiber distribution is dominant for the athlete of endurance sport. The second one is the 11 to 17 years. At this stage, the athlete is going on second growth spurt and focusing on cardio, and this at the end of this stage, the athlete grow and develop to be the athlete candidate. The characteristic of the athlete candidate should be low in basal or resting heart rate. And the last one is the stages above the 15 years old, the focusing in the muscle development. The athlete should have the high VO2 max. Jadi pada manajemen talent dari satu proses ya untuk perkembangan atlet itu dimulai dari awal 6 tahun pertama. Yang harus dipastikan pada saat ini adalah anak-anak ini memiliki distribusi dari otot tipe 1 yang kemudian sangat menentukan dari endurance. Ini yang kemudian jarang diperhatikan, tidak dilakukan proses mapping dan tidak dilakukan proses karakterisasi. Dianggap bahwa semua ya 50-50 antara tipe 1 dan tipe 2, sehingga kemudian potensi dari individual atlet ini tidak diketahui di 6 tahun pertama. Di tahun yang kedua, di tahap yang kedua, di 11-17 tahun ini focusingnya sudah ke arah kardio, latihannya sudah kemudian mengarah bagaimana membuat jantung menjadi lebih efektif dan efisien, yang ditunjukkan dengan heart rate basalnya yang rendah. Dan yang paling penting adalah di akhir ya masa 15 tahun ke atas ya, kalau 0 sampai 6 tahun dan 11 sampai 17 tahun ini terlewati dengan baik dan semuanya fase-fase ini juga dilakukan, karakterisasi juga dilakukan, maka kita tinggal menunggu hasilnya di akhir ya, di atas 15 tahun ini, karena ketika kita sudah mendapatkan bahwa si atlet ini memiliki VO2 max yang rendah, maka kesalahan itu sudah kita mulai sejak awal sebetulnya. Slide berikutnya, next slide please. As a summary for this presentation, the endurance is resulted from the collaborative function of respiration, cardiovascular, and muscle in an axis, an sequential axis. Each part of axis is developed in certain stages of ages with specific characteristics. Boost up the endurance has to refer on the stages 2 and do not are essential to maximize endurance development. Inadequate muscle negate any oxygen and nutrient availabilities to support the endurance performance. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you, Dr. Argarini.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Bambang Purwanto. I highlight some of the important notes from your talk. So that the axis of endurance is the collaborations between several organs, including respiratory, cardiovascular, and also muscles. And I think there are several stages that are really important of growth and development of endurance performance in athletes candidates. There are a few questions in the Q&A box, and also I think that I saw someone raise their hands, but just hold on because we will start our discussions at the end of the presentations. So you still may write your questions in the questions box down the bottom here. All right, now we are moving to our next speaker, Associate Professor Jarek Maestu, PhD from Institute of Sport Sciences and Physiotherapy, University of Tartu, Estonia. So I will introduce first Professor Jarek Maestu is an assistant professor of sport biology in Institute of Sport Sciences and Physiotherapy, University of Tartu. His main research interests have been training physiology and also coaching sciences, where he also earned his PhD in 2004. However, in recent years, he has also focused much of studies on physical activity and possible interactions to different health parameters. He has published more than 100 articles and has been supporting of several Estonian national and international level athletes. He is currently working on internal training load and its use for training monitoring in athletes. He is working as Vice Dean of Development of Faculty of Medicine and also a member of Estonian Anti-Doping Disciplinary Committee. Without waiting any further, I would like to give the floor to Professor Jarek Maestu, who will be talking about internal training load as a marker for training monitoring in endurance sport.
Thank you very much, Dr. Argarini, for this very nice introduction. And I'm really, really happy that I could join this seminar and that the University of Airlangga invited us to be here. So it's a great pleasure to give a little talk to the other side of the world in this nice Friday morning in Estonia. Yes, my topic is about internal training load, which I think suits very nicely to the previous speaker, Professor Purwanto, who gave us a very good introduction about what is endurance and about the endurance axis. But yes, some words where we come from just before the introduction. So as you can see, Estonia is a really small country in the eastern part of Europe. We are not very big in nation. It's 1.3 million of us. And if you see Estonia a little bit bigger, then Tartu University is the central or southern part of Estonia. The main building of our university and a small picture of the central part of the Tartu. The university is not big. It's around 13,000 students, but it is the Estonian National University, and our aim is to give all kind of high education in our own language. Despite that, we have approximately 12% of foreign students who come to study in Tartu. So, if talking about endurance, we can say that all athletes, they aim for high-level performance. What they really need for that is that they need to manipulate with the training load. And the idea is that the training load has to increase in order to give better adaptivity for the athlete. So in basic terms, if you are younger, at younger stages, you do not need to train at very high load, but if you improve, training load has also to be increased. So the basic characteristics of the training load are three. They are intensity, volume, and frequency, meaning how intensively we train, how fast we are running, how long we are running in terms of time, and what is the frequency of our trainings. But the difficulty is that more is not always better. There are lots of athletes who think that if I train more, I will be better. And it is true for some time, but usually then there might be problems. The recovery period is not so long anymore, and athletes might suffer for overtraining. And despite they expect the increase in their performance, they see that their performance is declining. So it is the million-dollar question. What is the best training plan for any kind of athlete? And sports science just is able to give the general guidances and can be pretty much specific, but it's very seldom individual. So you have to know your athletes and design the training plans for them individually if their performance is increasing. And if we talk about training load, we have to make the difference between the external load and the internal load. And the external training load is basically the load if we talk about in terms of planning of the training. For example, if we give the athlete the task to run 10 kilometers, then it's the external load. We can also indicate the intensity of this 10-kilometer run. For example, do it at 140 heart rates. So in these terms, we also speak about the absolute terms, but we can give also the indication or the training plan in terms of relative values, like run 10 kilometers at 80% of your maximal heart rate. So this gives the relative view. For external load also, the lifted weight can be used. And if we now manipulate with the external load, that is the athlete who has to adapt to this load. And the adaptation of the athlete depends on the physical capacity of the athlete. So how good is the athlete? If we all now start to run 10 kilometers, then those who are more fit, they get less training stress, and those who are unfit, they get bigger stress. So it depends very much on our physical capacity or stress tolerance. Our recovery potential is also an influencer. So how much time we do need to recover from a certain external load. And of course, about the age, training background, and also injuries have a big effect how the athlete relates to external training load. And this, how the athlete reacts to this 10-kilometer run at 100% heart rate is called the internal training load. So it's the individual reaction of the athlete to the certain training. And it also depends. We can measure internal training load with different subjective categories, psychological categories, different psychological questionnaires, for example, or physiological or biochemical or immunological markers. They all can be used if we want to measure internal load. But we have to think also that most of these parameters are not very practical. So coaches also need the practical parameters. And one of the most practical parameter in terms of internal load measurement is heart rate. So if we run at a certain speed, if we are more fit, then the heart rate probably is lower compared to the person who is more fitter. And we can say that heart rate is really very practical. It is easy to measure, and because we have also different devices available. So it's a very practical measure. And if we test our athletes and we also know the aerobic and anaerobic threshold of the athlete, we can basically divide all this intensity continuum to at least 3 different intensity zones. The green zone that ends with the aerobic thresholds, the yellow zone that lies between aerobic and anaerobic threshold, or the red zone, the intensity is higher than anaerobic threshold. And those 3 intensity zones, in my mind, they are mostly practical because they very nicely describe also a certain physiological mechanisms in the body that happen if we cross the borderlines of these zones. For example, if we talk about the lactate level, then if we run, for example, below our aerobic threshold, then the lactate production in the muscle and the elimination in the muscle is pretty much equal. So we do not see very much lactate flux to the system. We can measure very low lactate values in the blood, and they are very close to the resting level lactate. However, if we now increase the intensity, there is an increase in the muscular lactate flux, and the muscle itself cannot eliminate all the lactate. Thus, the lactate is delivered also to the system, into the blood, and it starts to increase. However, if we run at constant speed somewhere, this lactate level can be maintained. But if we now cross the anaerobic threshold borderline, there is a very big lactate production in the muscle. The muscle cannot eliminate it. The system cannot eliminate it anymore, and there is a sharp increase in lactate that we all can feel if we run faster than we can, that our legs get more difficult. And in terms of athletic response, if we ask from the athlete, we can say that this first green zone can be called easy. It's easy to run below aerobic threshold. There are moderate effort in the central zone, and probably effort is pretty hard if we want to exercise higher than anaerobic threshold. We can also calculate internal load based on heart rate. Probably the most easiest way is to use the average heart rate and we multiply it with the training time. So for example, if we run 60 minutes at 140 heart rate, we multiply 60 with 140 and we get the indication of training load. If we now run faster, our heart rate is higher, and at the same time amount, we multiply 60 to the higher number than 140 and we get the higher training load. However, this method might not be very good because it does not take into account different, for example, training intervals that might be during the training. So to adapt with that, different training impulse methods have been developed. I will not go in detail with this, but those methods by Edwards or Bannister and the rest, they also take into account the same, for example, intensity zones for Edwards, and for Bannister, the percentage of the heart rate, the heart rate reserve value, and they are, in those terms, they can be more specific in training load. Lucia's method, which I a little bit stop, is a little bit in more advantage compared to Edwards and Bannister, because if those first two models, they use the constants, it's either a percentage of the heart rate or the constant multiplier, then Lucia's method is principally the same, but the heart rate threshold, the heart rate values, or the heart rate cutoff points, they are individual. So they use the individual aerobic and anaerobic threshold values to calculate training load. In 2001, American scientist Carl Foster worked with RPE scales, and he developed the session RPE method. That is a subjective method, and it's also really practical because this can be used for every athlete. Just the athlete has to evaluate after the training session, how hard was your workout? So it takes into account the intensity factor and also the factor of the duration. So we can calculate the training load based on the rating number, that is from 0 to 10, and we multiply it with the duration of the session. Of course, we might argue that if the descriptors are from 1 to 10, basically, whether the maximal effort is just 10 times higher than sitting quietly on the sofa, or is it 1,000 times higher? We don't know that. But using those verbal descriptions, they help the athlete to indicate what was the effort, and then we can calculate also the training load. In 2006, there was a very nice study from Professor Seiler and his colleague Kierland, and they studied whether the same heart rate zones, 3 heart rate zones, and the athlete perceptions, how do they interact? And they saw that if we just purely take the heart rate zones based on how the heart rate accumulates in different zones, then there was a slight deviation, especially for especially for heart zones. And this was because of that if we do the interval trainings or heart trainings, there is a lag in heart rate response to the intensity, so that not very much heart rate accumulate in zone 3, but instead of that, rather it accumulates to the zone 2, and there is a little deviation compared to the session RPE. However, if they use the session goal heart rate, which means that, for example, if you do the intervals 3 times 5 minutes, you include those 5 minutes higher anaerobic threshold heart rates directly to zone 3, then they very nicely, the subjective and the objective heart rate measures go hand by hand. And this has led to a very nice concept in terms of endurance trainings, that 80% of the endurance trainings should be done in lower intensities than aerobic threshold, and 20% divided between zone 2 or zone 3. So this raised our question that does the same might apply to training load. We saw that Saylor and colleagues showed that if we just purely use the RPE descriptor, they are pretty much the same. But if we now multiply this RPE descriptor with the training load, with the training volume done here, we can get the number of the training load and how this training load fits into the zones. And can we get some better athletic adaptation on that? So my PhD student Rasmus did some studies on that and nicely defended his PhD in the spring. And we were lucky to have Professor Saylor as an international opponent. And I just present some of his results that might give some advantage to guide the endurance trainings in the future. So at first we were interested whether the same concept that Saylor and Kierland used, whether the easy trainings that apply to lower values than 4 based on this 10-point scale, or moderate values 6.5 and 6 to 5, and the hard values higher than 6, and the different methods used in the literature, do they produce the similar results? And then we developed our own method. We tried to, if Saylor and Kierland used fixed values like 4, 5 to 6, and 7, then we tried to find those individual values based on the incremental test by asking, how is your work rate during the incremental test? So what we found that if we talk about the easy rating, we saw that the method used for Saylor and the method used by ourselves, they finally ended up with a pretty similar results in terms of easy, moderate, or hard session. And the method used by Wallace and the colleagues wasn't maybe so good because it really concentrated the trainings into the moderate zone. So we then used this training load calculator, and what we could conclude was that the internal load that was accumulated with the hard sessions, it was significantly related with the improvements in the VO2 max. That was in our mind a good finding, because if you do interval sessions and you know that there is high heart rate and the intensity is high, you know that probably your VO2 max improves. So in terms of training load, we had the same relationships. However, what we saw was that in some cases, this hard session did not necessarily mean to be a high intensity session. But instead of that, if the swimmers did longer sessions, sometimes those longer low intensity sessions were hard for them. So, and when Rasmus did his studies, another study was published by Carl Foster and his colleagues, who also studied interval training with the swimmers, and they used 4 different intervals with the same speed, with the same heart rate, and they measured also the lactate that was similar between the sessions. But if they used RPE or session or training load, they saw that after each interval session, athletes evaluated the training, their effort much harder. That is in somewhat logical, but they indicated that the duration of the training or the fatigue might be the important components that actually might influence the RPE response in terms of training. So we also tried to study that. We had data from young cross-country skiers who train with a similar external load. So the training plan for them was similar in terms of distance and intensity. And after this training plan, we divided those subjects into two groups based on the RPE values that they gave on these trainings. So we can see that, and we call them group low and group high. So those in group high, their median RPE value was higher compared to the group low. And they did the same training. We can see that in terms of heart rate, there was no change in their trainings. So we can say that the athletes followed the training plan as it was used to be. Some trainings in zone 1, some heart rate in zone 2, and a little bit in zone 3 also. However, based on the effort, you can see that there was a big difference in easy efforts. There was also a big significant difference in the moderate efforts and of the hard efforts. And here you can see basically that what I forgot to say, that we eliminated this one high intensity session that the athletes also did. And all those values here are based on low intensity sessions, meaning that their training plan was meant to be in zone 1. And you can see that the training load that they actually accumulated in zone 1 was pretty different. And this also resulted in different response of training. So what we conclude was that training with similar external training loads, with similar training volume and intensity, it resulted in significant variation in internal training load, which indicates different strain from similarly prescribed trainings. And we also saw that the subject who accumulated higher internal load in low intensity sessions, they had also higher effects on improvements of maximal performance. So we had some pre-indication that if there is a difference in load, despite similar external load, it might have a big effect on performance also. So, and the last study that I now try to show you is that we now try to compare those heart rate zones that I showed you previously, and also those RPE zones that that were invented by that was suggested by Saylor and Kierland. And we used that 19 high-level rowers, and they performed a high-week training plan where the training volume was increased by 50%. So they did more than 1,000 minutes per week. And the last week before the competition, it was meant for the recovery. So they decreased about 25% their volume compared to the high volume period. We collected the training data, the mode, training mode, duration, RPE, heart rate, and also we used the rescue sport questionnaire to study the effect of their different stress recovery related values. So what we found, if we now compare heart rate versus RPE, so the baseline week, that was the normal trainings for them, you can see that this 80-20 model was nicely followed based on heart rate and also based on RPE. So the result that was also indicated by Saylor and Kierland, that in normal conditions, heart rate and RPE can produce very similar results. However, if you now increase the training volume, you can see that the distribution of the heart rate actually does not change. So it still is around 80% of low intensity trainings and a small amount of moderate and high intensity trainings. But what we saw was that the rating for the training became harder. So the same trainings, the volume increased, and the athlete started to rate the trainings harder. There were less easy sessions, but significantly more moderate session. And the tendency increased towards the end of the 4-week period. And if you remember, the last period was meant for recovery. You can see that despite decreasing training volume for 20%, it still indicated lower easy sessions, and actually the hard sessions, the increase was not significant, but still there was a tendency that during the recovery week, actually the sessions got harder. So, and this is a nice explanation where the individual response of the athlete, although it's subjective, might indicate some extra valuable data in terms of the adaptation for the athlete. We also studied the fatigue, and the fatigue actually was increasing continuously from week 2, 3 until week 4. So after the week 4, the athletes could not eliminate the fatigue. And if we did the correlation in terms of fatigue scale levels with a rescue sport questionnaire, we saw that training volume had no effect on the increase of fatigue. The distance had also no effect for the increase in fatigue. However, if we talk about the training load, overall training load, it had significant effect. And for the fatigue, the moderate and hard session had significant effect towards increased fatigue. So basically we can say that this model suggested by Kierland and Saylor, if we do the easy sessions in a correct way, that the session will be easy, then there is no increase in fatigue. And if the sessions become moderate or hard, there will be an increase in fatigue. To add also, you can see that there are no heart rate values. We also made the similar statistics for heart rate, and there was no relationships with fatigue and heart rate based zones. So we can say that in terms of the adaptation, the subjective rating of the internal training load has some advantages in terms of the regular, frequently used heart rate zones. So,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Professor Jarekmeister. You have 2 minutes left.
Yes,
for your presentation.
and yes, thank you. This is almost the last slide also. So, and the two conclusions that we made here was that if we compare frequently used heart rate intensity zones and training load zones, there is the advantage of the training load zones, as they have better interactions with the changes in the athletic status depending on the fatigue. So in the very last slide, what can be the perspective? These are just preliminary results. It's very difficult to prove in science something with 1 or 2 studies. So the question still remains, if we quantify the load, like easy, moderate, or hard, could it be used also for a coach, for example, for specific targets, that if a coach designs the session to be easy, whether the session will be easy also for athlete? So secondly, can we use changes in RPE that will be used, that will be induced by session duration? For example, if we run at 130 heart rate, 10 kilometers, we might rate it easy. But if we prolong this session to 2 hours, we also might moderate the same, we also might evaluate the same intensity session, hard or moderate, depending on our trainings. And how does acute fatigue interact to RPE response after different types of low intensity trainings? So again, what is the effect of training duration on the RPE response? So thank you very much. And sorry if I just got over the time limit.
Thank you so much, Professor Jack Maestro. It is really interesting and very quite difficult for me to understand the internal loading. Yeah, but we will have discussions after the last presentation from Professor Jurime. Okay, we are now moved to our last speaker. So our third speaker is Professor Jack Jurime. So Professor Jack Jurime is a full professor of coaching science in the Institute of Sport Science and Physiotherapy at the University of Tartu, Estonia. He earned his PhD at the University of Queensland, Australia in 1996, and currently he is the board member of Pediatric World Physiology Group and European College of Sport Sciences. He has published 3 monographs and more than 200 research articles in international peer-reviewed journals, and he has also supervised 18 PhD students. Professor Jack Jurime is a former rower, and his research has been focused on the monitoring of performance and training in athletes. Additional research interests include the assessments of physical activity, body composition, and also physical fitness. And he has also a special interest in pediatric exercise science. And today he will be talking about monitoring of performance and training in athletes. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Jack Jurime.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction, Dr. Argarini. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to present some results of my favorite sport, which I have been studying for the last 20 years, and my talk will specifically be on rowing, which is also classified as an endurance type of sport. But first of all, I would like to talk about the demands of this specific endurance sport. This sport.
Professor Jurime, I'm sorry,
Yes.
but your slide is not fully in the PowerPoint presentation.
Excuse me, I will sort it out.
So I can only see half of your presentations here.
Just a second. Jarek will help me, and then we will.
Yeah, the bottom part of your presentations I can. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So how it is now? Is it okay
yeah,
now?
yeah. Probably you need to swap into the presentations mode.
Just a second.
Yep.
So how does it look like? Is it okay now?
Not yet, still loading, I think.
So you just see half of the slides.
No, it's already full of the slide, but still not in the presentations mode.
So it's okay. Seda ma tegin üks share. So is it now in presentation mode?
Still not.
It's where we can see here pretty nicely.
Yep. No,
Was
it works before. It
It
works
was,
before.
okay. Sorry, I just try one more time.
Yeah.
So now,
Yep, it works. Thank you.
okay. I am sorry for this inconvenience, but hopefully now we can continue with my presentation. So at first, let's talk about the demands of rowing. Rowing, you have to have high maximal oxygen consumption values. You have to be ability to perform at a high percentage of VO2 max for the duration of the event, which is a 2000 meter and lasts about 5 to 7 minutes, depending on boat type. And you need to have higher power output or speed at the anaerobic threshold. Of course, you have to have good technique and ability to utilize fat as a fuel source during exercise of longer duration and high work rates. There are three ways to row faster for the athlete. At first, rowers can produce more energy. Secondly, rowers can use their energy more efficiently. And thirdly, rowers can produce more energy and use their energy more efficiently. And now let's look at the factors that affect this energy production and efficiency. And these include biomechanics, including rowing technique, race analysis, equipment, boat and oar developments, physiology, training concepts, fitness monitoring. That's what I would like to concentrate more on my talk today. Psychology, goal setting, motivation, sociology, team cohesion, and team support, and of course, sports medicine, which includes injury prevention and also rehabilitation. We have to understand that physiology, psychology, sociology, and sports medicine allow us or the rower to produce more energy, while biomechanics and equipment are responsible for the more efficient energy usage. Now, the characteristics of the rowing performance. As I said, the typical competition takes place on a 2000 meter course and lasts, depending on weather conditions, 5.5 to 7 minutes. During a race, muscle contraction is relatively slow and about 32 to 38 or even higher or even more than 40 duty cycles per minute are used by rowers, and during competition, a rower depends mainly on his or her aerobic metabolism because energy stores and glycolysis are limited to cover the energy demand only for approximately up to 2 minutes. And energy contribution during this 2000 meter performance comes mostly from aerobic resources, and Seher found that the aerobic energy contribution may be up to 86%, which means that the rowers have to train to do a long distance low intensity trainings to train up the aerobic energy mechanism. And the more energy rowers can obtain aerobically, the better the basic conditions can be determined. And here you can see how that in total, up to 87% of the energy during 2000 meter rowing race is covered by aerobic mechanism, up to 14% by anaerobic glycolysis, and only 5% by anaerobic alactic metabolism. And if we are looking for, if we are dividing our 2000 meter rowing distance to 4 parts, then we can see that during the first 500 meters, aerobic energy contribution is up to 60%, while the fourth 500 meter distance, the energy comes up to 90% from aerobic sources, which means that rowers depend mostly on their aerobic metabolism. And as you can see from this picture, that times of Oxford-Cambridge boat race winning times have been significantly increased over time, and similarly the winning times of men's world championships for single scullers. And very atypical, and rowers as participants of endurance athletes are very different to others. For example, if we compare them to marathon runners, then body size requirements for the average elite male heavyweight rower is height up to 2 meters or 1.85 centimeters for a woman athlete, weight about 95 kilograms. And although they are quite big and tall, their body fat percentages are quite low. For elite men rowers, it's about 8% and about 14% for elite heavyweight female rower, and up to 75% of the muscle mass is used in rowing. So as you can see, it is a very interesting sport in terms of endurance training to study. And if we are going back to, let's say, 150 or more years, then we can see that at that time rowers were not so big and not so heavy as rowers today. And for example, Ned Harlan at the end of 19th century, his height was about 173 centimeters, and he weighed about 71 kilograms. But if we are looking for this Oxford rowers on the men's 8 boat class, then you can see that their height is almost 2 meters, average height is almost 2 meters, and average body mass is almost 100 kilograms. And if we are now looking back to this 150 years, we can see that that rower at that time is about the average height of the coxswain of this boat. It is good to see that rowing has been studied already 100 years, and Henderson and Haggard presented a very nice paper in American Journal of Physiology in 1925, studying the Yale University crew, which presented at that time US, and their average height was 185, and average body mass was about 82 kilograms. And here I would like to show our best rower who has competed in the last 5 Olympic Games finals, and how his anthropometric parameters have been developed from junior class to senior A. And as you can see, his body mass is more than 100 kilo, but his body fat percent has decreased from junior class to senior A level, and is less than 10%. We can, for training monitoring, we can test athletes in different ways. We can do it in the laboratory using concept 2 rowing ergometer, measuring VO2 max, or measuring different strength parameters. Here you can see the earlier early indoor rowing machines that were mostly used for the development of the rowing technique. And here you can see the testing in Estonia, what we have been doing last couple of decades. And you can see that this is an early figure that we tested the VO2 max on the field basis. It's always better to test your athletes in the real conditions, not in the laboratory setting. Now talking about the physiological parameters, as you can see on this figure already presented by Professor Seke in 1975, that the VO2 max as indicated by liters per minute is very nicely related to the place in championships. So you have to, the higher you have your VO2 max, the better you could have the better place you could have in championships. And the development of VO2 max has been quite remarkable over the last decades. And the question is how high the rowers can develop the VO2 max. As you can see from this figure, the highest aerobic capacity values in endurance athletes have presented by cross-country skiers and reaching up to 85 milliliters per kilogram per minute, which means that it is about 6.3 liters per minute in an athlete with a body mass of 75 kilograms. And if we would like to compare this with rowers, and let's take that his body mass is about 95 kilograms, then we can get the figure of 79 milliliters per kilogram per minute. But if we are looking for the liters per minute, so we can ask, can do these kinds of rowers exist, and where we can get them to train them up to 7.5 liters per minute. And here, I would like to show again the figure of our best rower, and you can see that from junior level to senior A level, his VO2 max has developed from 5.5 to 6.5 liters per minute. Maximal aerobic capacity from 450 watts to 500 watts, and which is also typical for rowers, is that they are presenting a very high levels of ventilation from 172 liters per minute up to 194 liters per minute. And Sarah also reports that rowers can have a higher than 200 liters per minute ventilation parameters. Here I would like to show one study what we did with our rowers, where we had 11 athletes who were competing for the places in the team. We had double sculls and quadruple sculls, and 6 rowers were selected for Olympic Games and 5 are not selected, and those that were selected presented higher VO2 max values, higher PA max values than non-selected rowers. And we studied their preparatory period, and after 24 weeks of preparatory periods, the selected rowers had quite similar values than 24 weeks before, but the not selected rowers had significantly increased the aerobic capacity values. It could say that they were younger, not so experienced, and that was the reason why they increased their VO2, their aerobic capacity values as a result of 24-week period. Now, how to test the rower's abilities? As I already told you that rowing depends up to the 2,000-meter rowing depends up to 70% of about 70% of the aerobic capacities. And Jensen, who was a physiologist of Danish national team, did a 4-day test series for the rowing athletes. The first day they performed the 10-second maximal tests on a rowing ergometer, assessing the muscle power, and they also referenced it to the classical 2-kilometer rowing distance, and it had to be about 173% of the value of 2,000-meter. The second day they tested the 6-kilometer rowing performance. Second test on the first day was a 6-kilometer rowing performance, assessing their aerobic capacity, and the second day was a classical 2-kilometer distance. Third day was 60 seconds of the maximum test, testing their glycolytic metabolism. And I am not sure why they did on the fourth day 60-minute test to assess the rowers' aerobic endurance. Now I would like to show you a very nice study which I always present to my students. It's a development of training over 3 decades among Norwegian international rowers by Fiskerstrand and Seele, and they studied these Norwegian rowers who won Olympic and World Championships medals. So only medal winners were studied, and as you can see, the VO2 max value was increased more than half a liter over these 3 decades, and their annual training volume also increased more to 1,000 hours per year over these 3 decades. So these Norwegian international rowers said, hey, body height did not change over these 3 decades. Similarly, body mass did not change over 3 decades, while, as already said, VO2 max increased more than half liters over these 3 decades, and the highest value for Norwegian rower was 7.15 liters per minute. So there is still room to improve it. And here I would like to show the form and intensity that was used to quantify training among these Norwegian rowers. Of course, main training tool is the long distance rowing from 1 to 3 hours. Similarly, long land-based endurance training in forms of cross-country skiing during winter times, and also cycling. Interval training with 3 to 10 minute long intermittent bouts, race-based training, overspeed training, strength training to increase, say, muscle mass during preparatory period, and strength endurance training, which is very typical only for rowers. It's about 50% of 1 repetition maximum load and up to 5 repetitions in the 1 set, and also flexibility training. Now, how the changes over these 3 decades in training characteristics were, as you can see from preparatory periods, a long distance training has been emphasized. In 90s, interval training has a little bit increased, strength endurance has increased, while during competitive period, also long distance training has increased, interval training has increased, while race-based training has been de-emphasized, even and overspeed training has been de-emphasized over the last 3 decades during the competitive periods in rowers. In summary, annual training volume increased about 20%, with most of the increase occurring during the preparatory period. Large increases in basic endurance training at intensities clearly below the first lactate turn point have been utilized, and training at higher intensities at or above race pace has been de-emphasized, and greater emphasis has been placed on training at intensities requiring 90 to 95% of VO2 max, most often in the form of long interval bounds. In this slide, I just want to show you the US national team training during the peak loading period. As you can see, they are doing 3 sessions a day, 30 plus hours per week. And of course, they are doing 3 times per week weight sessions, but most of the training, as you can see, is a steady state in different boat classes, or steady state, for example, in the 8 or in ergometer performance. So a lot of trainings as a low intensity, long distance rowing, which gives us, so the next question is how to monitor these rowers. At first, how to monitor the single training sessions, as in preparatory period up to 95% of trainings can be done below anaerobic results, and in competitive period up to 75% of trainings can be done below anaerobic results, which means that rowers spend a lot of energy during the trainings, and they might not be in positive energy balance. And a lot of earlier studies studied the different hormonal values, stress hormones, testosterone, cortisol, growth hormone values, and other blood biochemical values, but it has to be emphasized that they not always reflect well the training response to this training session. And what we and others have started is the evaluation of different adipokines, osteokines, and myokines during acute long distance rowing exercise, as their implications in the regulation of energy homeostasis in rowers. In this figure, you can see the biological role of different myokines, osteokines, and adipokines in muscle, bone, and fat crosstalk. And as you can see, exercise can increase different myokines, different osteokines, and also when you are inactive, these different myokines, osteokines, and adipokines reflect differently. So what we did is we studied the typical long distance single sculling, which is about 90% of the heart rate turn point or lactate turn point. An average of the 2 hours was a distance over a distance of 20 kilometers, and the estimated energy expenditure of this exercise trial was about 12 to 1500 kilocalories. And we take the blood analysis before the exercise, immediately after the exercise, and after the first 30 minutes. And we assess different adipokines, osteokines, and myokines. And as you can see, this adipokine visvatine was significantly decreased as a result of exercise, while in control conditions done in over a similar time period, this adipokine did not change. The same applies for the leptin concentrations, again significantly decreased, no changes during the control trial. And here you can see also the changes in other osteokines, which were increased as a result of training, and also one myokine, interleukin 6, which was increased as a result of 2 hours rowing training sessions. While we also measured the typical stress hormones, testosterone and cortisol concentrations. And as you can see, this 2-hour exercise session did not influence these stress hormone levels, and we can say that they are not useful to assess a single training session. And we also did a correlational study where we found that leptin as a adipokine and osteokalcin as a osteokine concentrations measured immediately after the training sessions were related to the distance covered, and plasma sclerostin, which is also quite newly used osteokine to study energy expenditure of the exercise, and this concentration after the training session was related to the distance covered as a marker of energy expenditure, and also for the weekly training volume as a marker of training stress. So we can conclude that the significant effect of acute on-water prolonged sculling exercise on peripheral markers, that this study demonstrates that the significant effect of acute prolonged sculling exercise on peripheral markers of energy homeostasis produced by adipose, skeletal, and muscle tissues. And these peripheral markers of negative energy balance may serve as a mediators of metabolic reaction for the energy requirements during and after physical exercise in athletes. Now, when the rowers are exercising at low intensity, high volume trainings, the training stress can accumulate and produce fatigue. So in this figure is a presentation of a continuum of different stages of training responses modified from Musen and colleagues. And as you can see, if your training stress is too low, you are undertrained, you are recovered, and your performance does not change or even decrease. However, if your training response is too severe and too long, you are overtrained, your recovery takes months to years, and there is a long-term decrease in performance. So we have to now figure out which kind of markers we can use to monitor training of our athletes. And here I can say that there is no single marker that increases or decreases during changes in training volume that can exactly reflect where the athlete becomes functionally overreached or even overtrained. So we have to use a complex of different markers, and each athlete has a how we call it, like a fingerprint, when we have to measure the different parameters before they start exercising heavily, and then we can compare lately testing using the same testing battery and compare them to this fingerprint. And how we can monitor training status in highly trained male rowers is, of course, in each sport you have to measure performance parameters. You can use psychological parameters using different questionnaires. As Jarek in his presentation showed, he used the recovery stress questionnaire. There is also another questionnaire, profile of mood states, what is I think extensively used in athletes, and what is for us is most interesting is different hormonal parameters to assess the training status in highly trained male rowers. Here I would like to show
Professor Jeremy.
Sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but your time is only 2 minutes left.
Okay, I can try to do it very quickly. And
thank you.
here you can see that we did a 6-week training period where we increased the training time extensively up to 50%. And then again, we had a recovery period for 2 weeks. And they did say the 2000-meter rowing performance before heavily increasing training periods, after 3 weeks period, and after 2 weeks of recovery period. And as you can see, no changes in rowing performance. We used the rescue index, which nicely reflected the changes in training volume. We also used fasting blood samples every week, and you can see they also nicely reflected changes in training volume, while these stress hormones, cortisol and testosterone, were not influenced by changes in training volume. And we can see that leptin concentrations and rescue index perhaps can be used as a marker of training stress in these rowers. And if we are looking for these 3 2000-meter tests, we also took the blood sample before the test, immediately after the test, and after 30 minutes of recovery period, and 50% increase in training volume did not change the pattern of the response of testosterone and cortisol concentration. So there is no difference if the athletes train 10 hours or 20 hours, the response to 2000-meter rowing performance is the same. While leptin concentrations after 3-week period were significantly decreased as a result of 3-week heavy training periods, while they were not influenced in the first place and on the last 2 weeks of recovery periods. And from this study, the general conclusion is that the fasting plasma leptin, which is a most used marker of adipose tissue, and rescue index from the psychological parameters, demonstrated a dose-response relationship with changes in training volume, and maximal exercise-induced changes in leptin could be used as a possible first sign of overreaching in the condition of increase in training volume in highly trained male rowers. And finally, I would like to make one more point, that Professor Meusen in his classical study showed that perhaps if we would like to know the border where our athlete starts overtrained, we have to measure the training to the performance changes after the second training of this day, not on the first training. Okay, thank you very much. And sorry for not being on time.
Thank you so much, Professor Jeremy. Which one is you from this photo?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for all the speakers. Now we are moving to the discussion session. So I saw some people raise their hands, but before we start with the questions from the participants, so I would like to invite all the speakers to be in the same screen with me, and also I will invite the panelists. So there are already 3 panelists with us: Dr. Lily Herawati, Dr. Purwosri Rejeki, and also Dr. Wicahyo Kartiko, Sarjana Pendidikan Magister Kesehatan. Okay, so I will give opportunity to the first our Dr. Lily Herawati, probably, yeah, to ask the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arga. I'm impressed with all of speakers' presentation. I have got many knowledge from you all. Well, can I have 3 questions for each speaker, Dr. Arga?
Probably just one, Dr. Lily, because I saw so many participants raise their hands, and there are also a lot of questions in the chat box.
Okay, because I think I
So
will.
sorry, Dr. Lily, I know you're very interested.
Okay, I will ask to Prof. Jarek Maistu. It is great to have a new insight about the external and internal load. As a medical doctor, I think external and internal load is part of exercise dose, which is the exercise prescription. Regarding your explanation, in my perception, please correct me if I'm wrong. The determination of internal load after the subject has exercised. I mean like this. The determination of internal load is held after the subject has exercised, and therefore, in my thoughts, identify the internal loading is useful for evaluation of the exercise program or training program that the coach give to him or to her. However, is it possible if internal load is also to plan the goal of the exercise or training program? How to do that? Or for planning, is it referred to, for planning, the term for the planning is referred to external load, or can we also say that there's also internal load? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. There was a little bit internet connection problem, so I might probably not get your question right, but it looked to me that, did you ask that whether the internal load can be used as a parameter for training prescription?
I think for planning program,
Yeah.
Professor Maistu.
In the planning.
Based on your explanation, I think is we determine internal load after the someone has done the exercise. Is it correct? If I'm wrong, please correct me. Or internal load is also for the planning program, because okay, it's like that. Thank you.
From my perspective, it is currently in the scientific literature, and as much as I know the coaches, at least in Estonia, currently, if they study internal load or use internal load, they currently use it after the training. So they would like to know what would be the athletic reaction compared to the about the external load. However, I know that, or I think that the advantage could be that, yes, it is possible to use internal load as a planning tool. For example, if you plan that this low intensity session for example 2 hours, and you expect that the internal the RPE, for example, will be 4, so then you can, as a coach, you expect it. Then you as a coach can also indicate that I expect this internal load to be 4 times 120, it's 480. And instead of that, yes, you can use it and then start to compare it what the athlete after the training indicates, and how much does this deviate from what the coach has expected. So yes, it can be used in both ways.
Okay, but if we use after the exercise, so is it can be used for prevention if there is an overdose. So it's because almost of my client is not athlete, just yes, sedentary people, something like that. Okay, thank you, Dr. Arga.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lily.
Jarek.
Yeah. Can we use that one for just like Dr. Lily questions? Can we use the internal loading monitoring for also not for athlete, but just like for recreational athlete?
A question for me? Yeah.
Yep.
Of course, you can use it for recreative athlete also, because lots of recreational athletes actually, again, at least in Estonia, they train by themselves. So they do not have, they might not have the proper training plan, but it has been shown that this RPE concept works very well in different level or performance level athletes. So yes, for recreational athlete, it is also a very good tool to study internal load.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. Nice to. Okay, now we are moving to our next panelist, probably Dr. Pak Dwi Cahyo Kartiko.
Okay, Dr. Algas.
Yeah, how are you, Pak Dwi Cahyo?
Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. And in this occasion, I would like to deliver my gratitude for giving me the chance to join this prestigious event. I just have one question for each speaker. Okay. First, for Prof. Bambang Purwanto. One of the stakes of endurance development is delivering stage. It's some consideration this stake could be the most important stake. Then we know that peak VO2 increases throughout childhood to puberty in both boys and girls. The problem starts when the puberty hits. Peak VO2 continues to increase in boys and it level in girls as they approach adulthood. As the consequence of the increased fat in the period of menstrual cycle. As you said, during the delivery stage, we cannot limit their meals. When puberty hits, the endurance between boys and girls somehow would be different. What do you think about that? Okay. Second, Associate Prof. Jarek Mestu. Very great and insightful knowledge shared by Associate Professor Jarek Mestu about the training load. It seems that heart rate become an important parameter to assess training all in endurance sports. However, heart rate value have to be interpreted with caution because even under controlled conditions, when no change of training status can be observed and the heart rate is varied around 6 and 7 heart per minute. Furthermore, factor of temperature, dehydration, medication can influence heart rate as well. What do you think about that? And the last, Prof. Jack.
Very short, Pak Cahyo. Yeah, just very short questions to Professor Jurime probably. Yeah.
Yes, what do you think about that? That statement saya tadi, Mbak. Yeah. Okay, Prof. Jack Jurime. As there are chain of training previous to studies, an elite rower saw that intermittent exercise even greater improvement in VO2 max and power output compared to continuous exercise. Besides, the contribution of anaerobic energy also influence the adolescent rowers. Therefore, different training with various level of exercise can also be done by providing sport scientists, coach, and athletes with new information and possibilities for personalizing training schedules in which the training between one rower will be different from other rower. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Dwi Cahyo.
Yes.
Let me start with the first question for Professor Purwanto, and also probably this is also related with Professor Jurime because this is about VO2max and growth and development. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Arka. Thank you, Dr. Dwi Cahyo Kartiko, for the question. Nice question. Growth and development between male and versus female is quite different. Right? Saya coba jelaskan lewat bahasa Indonesia saja ya supaya kemudian tidak salah paham. Jadi
Mantap.
memang saran saya tadi bahwa kita tidak boleh membatasi makan ya, atau porsi makan untuk individu yang sedang tumbuh dan berkembang. Itu kaitannya adalah sebetulnya pada saat seseorang itu masuk di dalam quick growth spurt ya, jadi pada saat dia tumbuh dan berkembang dengan cepat ya, ada first, ada secondary growth spurt. Pada saat itu sering kali kita meresponnya itu dengan salah. Yang dimaksud dengan salah itu adalah seringkali orang tua itu khawatir karena melihat pola makan anaknya berubah, pola aktivitas anaknya berubah, pola tidur anaknya berubah. Sehingga orang tua itu seringkali kemudian justru marah kepada anaknya. Nah, ini yang saya maksud tadi bahwa tolong kemudian pada saat itu terjadi kita harus sebagai orang tua itu wise ya, sebagai orang tua kita harus memahami bahwa anak kita sedang tumbuh dan berkembang. Nah, mengenai perbedaan tumbuh dan berkembangnya antara pria dan wanita memang polanya berbeda. Wanita biasanya growth spurtnya terjadi lebih awal dibandingkan pria. Nah, sehingga kemudian saya setuju dengan Dr. Dwi Cahyo tadi bahwa kita harus melihat ini case-nya adalah laki atau perempuan gitu ya. Sehingga ketika yang penting adalah kewaspadaan kita tahu bahwa ini sedang dalam masa pertumbuhan cepat, maka sebaiknya gitu ya, kita merespon dengan sangat bijaksana. Jadi tidak kemudian justru melarang anak untuk pergi keluar rumah, tidak kemudian membatasi anak untuk makan dan jajan, juga tidak kemudian membiarkan anak itu istirahat untuk terlalu larut malam. Saya kira itu tanggapan saya, Dr. Dwi Cahyo. Matur nuwun.
Terima kasih banyak, Profesor Bambang Purwanto. Okay, let's move into the next questions, probably from Pak Dwi Cahyo to Professor Maestro about the influence of the environment to the internal loading evaluations.
Yes, thank you for this question. It is extremely important as we mostly compete outside or train outside. Indeed, the effect of environment, hydration or heat, we know that it affects heart rate. And it probably, if it relates heart rate, it probably relates also to RPE. But I think, or at least I don't remember the studies yet to be done that how much, for example, compared to heart rate, the RPE might deviate. So in this case, I think there is still much yet to study. But of course, if you do the same exercise in the heat or in less hydrated conditions, it will relate to your RPE also. So definitely it's true, and it's an important point. So the answer is yes, it reflects internal load.
Okay, thank you. So the last question is for Professor Jurime, but probably can you please repeat again the questions? You talk about the personalizing you asked about the personalizing monitoring for the rowers, or what, Pak Dwi Cahyo? for Professor Jeremy. Your last questions?
Yes, you have to personalize your training monitoring, as I already told in my presentations, etc. Not two persons who react to the training stress and overtraining similarly at first, and you have and there is no single marker that would characterize this training. And another question was that how the athletes can train together in different boats. If I understand correctly, usually young athletes start to training with single sculls, so that it is more or less individual sport. And also when you are starting to train during your preparatory period, you also start training with single sculls, and you only sit together to the bigger boat during the competitive period. And yes, as this Sailor and Fiskersand and Taylor study showed, continuous exercise is continuous low intensity exercise is the most important parameter of training, which is done up to 90% of all trainings in some periods during the preparatory period, and only high intensity trainings are done only once or twice per week at that time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we are moving to our last panelist, Dr. Purwo.
Hello.
Probably just one question.
Only one question.
Yes.
I just want to ask. Can I ask one short question for each speaker? But okay, one question for maybe from Prof. Jack. Pardon if my spelling is not correct. Prof. Jack. We also have rowing machine in our sport health science center. Could you give us your suggestion how we can using this machine for the optimal results, especially for weight loss or building the muscle, our muscle? For example, how we should warming up and how to main exercise and do the cooling down for the optimal result. Thank you.
This rowing machine to use in rowers, in athletes, or just for recreational purposes?
Okay.
Which one?
Which one, Dr. Purwo? Using for athletes or for recreational?
No, for ordinary people, not for athletes.
It's for recreational, probably.
Yeah, recreational. Yeah, recreational goal.
Well, there are two ways to do it. It's the first way, of course, is a suggestion is to row for, let's say, for 30 plus minutes in low intensity training to build up your cardiorespiratory fitness. But I can understand that this could be quite boring, and for these purposes you can use the same to have a more fun and to do less work, and to spend less time. You can also use the same high intensity interval training or sprint interval training sessions, although the rowing machine can be quite challenging for persons who are quite lightweight, if I can say so. But yeah, I think to start and before your technique is not so good, to start with low intensity training, and once you are more comfortable with this machine, you can try also some interval training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Jack. Thank you, Dr. Adka.
Thank you, Dr. Purwo, Professor Jeremy. Okay, now we still have only 10 minutes left. And I think there are two participants already raised their hands. So I give an opportunity to just wait for a moment. I can see. Oh, now three. Okay, Stefanus Hendrata Darmadi. Pak Stefanus.
Ya, apa?
Yep. You raise your hand, so do you want to ask questions?
Sorry, I press it wrongly.
Oh, okay. So you don't want to ask the questions? Okay, so probably to the next one is Pak Adrian Surya.
Yeah, Dr. Arga, can you hear
Dr.
me?
Adrianta, yeah, please.
Sorry, I don't open my video.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'd like to ask a question to Professor Xia. You mentioned in one of your slides, your training is until 85 to 90% of VO2 max in one session, in some sessions, yeah? Not all, but in some sessions for the rowers. Do you think that this high VO2 max intensity doesn't make more stress for radicals, for getting more worse for the stress oxidative radicals that will be produced by this intensity? Or are you then giving antioxidant to prevent this stress radicals? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In my slides, I presented this what Norwegian rowers are doing in their preparation, and I think that if this high intensity interval training has been done in not so in proper way, I mean that not so often, then it can help you to develop your physical capacities. And there is no problem. Thank you.
So do you give also antioxidant for them?
Yeah.
Professor Jurimek, do you also give antioxidant for them?
No, no, they are not giving them. No, not as a supplement. No.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay. And I think all the question is for the two top question is for Professor Maestu. Professor Maestu, could you please read also the question because it's quite long. The first one is from Jatmiko. In terms of age and gender, from children to adults, what is the best prescriptions? How high level we use RPE as a parameter to increase endurance in every step to make the best endurance in professional athlete in the future?
The honest answer, how to make the best endurance professional athlete in the future is the same million-dollar question that is very difficult to answer. But what you can do is again that if you start to measure with the RPE with the kids, there are at least what you have to know is that for the kids, if they are younger than 12 years of age, there are different scales developed, because children might not well understand. For example, if you say that the training how was the training, that it's moderate, so what it's actually means. So the measurement itself might not be valid enough. But if you monitor the RPE together with the fatigue levels or some other subjective parameters that define the condition on the athlete, then you can start to manipulate or understand what kind of load produces what kind of adaptations. And this is again the way that, in my mind, you should start to use the RPE, or it can also be the heart rate based training load. So the quick answer is you have to study it in terms of the athlete condition, also Professor Saylor says that it's in terms of the load, stress, and strain. You apply some load, it causes the stress in the athlete. For example, the same that I told, the 140 heartbeat run. So this is a stress. And if you stress the athlete too much, the same load can be a strain. So and this is the question of the coach, how you can define the limits that the athlete can stress or tolerate strain. So thank you.
Thank you. Just wondering, do you use, because you said that it is quite difficult to understanding the RPE for the kids. So do you have different modality or tools for you for measuring for calculating or measuring the RPE in children?
Yes, they have been developed, like the Omni scale used with the pictures, so that there is still a descriptor, the verbal descriptor, and also a picture how the runner, or if you climb the stairs, there are different pictures available. And the scales some of the scales have moved to a 5-point scale. So basically that there are not so many verbal descriptors for the kid.
Okay, thank you, Professor Mestu. Now is the questions also from the chat box. I think there is very long questions from Doni Ardi Kusuma. In many sports, the practitioner measure the RPE per session's load of training. So it is durations times sessions RPE. And nowadays, many of them also focus to measures and check the training monotony and strain based on their RPE data. And sometimes they forget to check the details about internal versus the external load when they do some extensive training. So from your perspective, which one the practitioner must see, and the final product of variation in the training load, or we see the details one by one, internal and external load? I see that you already answered, but probably you can also say the answer. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this question. Yes, I typed the answer, but yes, in my mind, if we need some information regarding training or athlete or testing, then the most important, or the point when you had to start, is to figure it out, what is the most valuable and important information that you can use. Then there is another level of the information that is also important, but maybe not so. And then at the very upper top is nice to have information. So if you have possibilities, then focus on those aspects also. And in those terms, I think that if you study internal load first, is more important than to start to following strain and monotony, because internal load reflects quicker, and based on internal load calculations, you can start to follow the next level. So if you're not using nothing, at first make the internal load as a parameter. If you already measure somehow internal load, it doesn't have to be RPE, it can be also heart rate. So then you can also start to calculate monotony and strain and use them as the additionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Meister. Okay, so the last questions, I think this is for Professor Bambang Purwanto from Riko Cahyadi. I think there are two questions in here. Is there even cardiac muscular thickening rather than cardiac volume capacity to process oxygen? As an example condition as impairment of cardiac and respiratory development.
Thank you, Dr. Airlangga.
Yes, Professor.
I have answered this question. I have answered this question by typing. Dr. Airlangga, can you hear?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Professor Meister, raise your hands. Is there something wrong?
No, there is nothing wrong. I just wanted to, if you told that there is just one more question, then if Professor Purwanto would answer that, then I would have also one question for him.
Okay,
so in case,
all right.
if the questions
Sure.
are limited, then I would have just one question for Professor Purwanto.
All right.
But I can wait till there will be.
Yeah, after there's questions, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You can continue, Professor Bambang.
Okay, I have answered this question from the Ibu Sri Sumaringsi, right?
No, from Rico.
Oh, from Rico, okay.
Yeah,
Can you
there are
repeat
two questions
the question?
there. So there are two questions from Rico. It is continue between each other. So is there even cardiac muscular thickening rather than cardiac volume capacity to process oxygen? As an example, condition as impairment of cardiac and also respiratory development.
Ya, jadi tadi sudah saya jawab sebetulnya itu pertanyaan Rico. Saya coba ulang saja ya dalam bahasa Indonesia karena juga Rico orang Indonesia. Jadi ada dua kondisi ya yang kemudian menunjukkan jantung itu merespon terhadap load. Yang pertama adalah kondisi di mana jantung ini membesar secara eksentrik dan yang kedua adalah membesar secara konsentrik. Keduanya berbeda dalam hal bahwa yang membesar secara eksentrik itu kemudian ada pembesaran yang tidak diikuti dengan penebalan dinding dari jantung sehingga kemudian tidak membatasi volume dari rongga di dalam jantung. Sedangkan yang konsentrik ini pembesaran jantung ini lebih disebabkan oleh karena penebalan dinding jantung, jadi otot jantungnya menebal sehingga kemudian membatasi ruang di dalam jantung. Nah, pada kondisi yang kedua yaitu yang konsentrik ini yang kemudian menyebabkan seseorang itu jantungnya bermasalah. Nah, sebetulnya yang diinginkan adalah pada saat seseorang itu tumbuh dan berkembang yang diikuti dengan latihan secara fisiologis jantungnya membesar secara eksentrik yang kemudian bisa menguntungkan untuk meningkatkan kapasitas dari pompa jantung. Seperti itu Dr. Airlangga yang saya jawab untuk Bapak Rico.
Terima kasih. Okay, the very last questions from Professor Derek Meister, Professor Bambang Purwanto. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On your talent identification slide, you showed in the first stage that there is also a genetic testing in addition to muscular fiber testing. So it's a really interesting topic actually. And I was just wondering that do you do such kind of testing in Indonesia, or if you do not do you have some suggestions what kind of genetic testing might be done on that? Because in the literature there is lots of controversy on that. So yes, about genetic testing and talent at the young age kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, Associate Professor Jarek. Nice to this nice question. Actually, we have done yet at Indonesia. Actually, this is already in experimental study, not in practical, daily practical in sport. There are two genetic targets to detect the for the individual characteristic of endurance athlete. The first one is gene which respond to the arginine intervention. Because of Asian and African race did not respond to the arginine supplementation because of our genetic, our gene did not respond to arginine supplementation. That's why we should to make a solution how to switch our gene from off to on to get suitable response to the arginine supplementation. It's quite different between the European race that this gene is always in on condition, not for the Asian and the African. The second one is the target for the identification is the troponin I, the I troponin from the muscles. Because from our study, this I troponin is response to the ability of muscle to survive from the radical oxygens, which have serious problem with the muscles. The I troponin, if oxidized by the radical oxygens, will lose its ability to bind the calcium. So that's why sometimes we found that someone with the high oxygen radical impairment, they got a serious injury for the muscle damage. So we have to know earlier for the mapping for the muscles who have this kind of troponin I.
Okay, thank you very much for the detailed answer. It was really interesting to know that you have your own targets that are not very common yet.
But actually, this is we have done yet in daily practice in our sports in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because there are so many gens, yeah, and also in sports, right? There are still questions, but unfortunately that we already running out of time. Thank you so much for all the speakers for the very nice, very amazing presentations and also very great discussions. Also to all panelists, Dr. Lili Herawati, Pak Dicahyo, and also Dr. Purwosri Rejeki. I hope from this seminar, from this webinar, we can get something to learn, and also all the participants can enjoy this webinar. Okay, that I should end this webinar, and then I will hand over this webinar to the Master of Ceremony, to Dr. Sundari. Thank you so much. See you later in the next webinar. Thank you, Professor Jack Yurime, Professor Jack Mesto, and Professor Bambang Purwanto.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the honorable speakers, Professor Bambang Purwanto, Associate Professor Yarek Maistu, Professor Yaki Rimai, and thank you to the panelists, Dr. Lili Herawati, Dr. Purwosri Rejeki, and Dr. Dwi Cahyo Kartiko, and also the amazing moderator for today, Dr. Arkarini, for all the great discussion. We learned so much today from all the speakers and the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the end of our program. Thank you very much for actively participating in this webinar. I hope you enjoy the webinar, and hopefully we will meet again in the future program. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Konnichiwa, Ohata Sensei. Ogenki desu ka?
We are also the scientists. We are the practitioners.
Monggo Pak Kresna. Kak Kresna.
Tadi mungkin langsung pada pembelajaran dan
moments that you have interaction as powerful as possible and limit the amount.
Dengan pandemi COVID-19 ini, kehadiran FK UNER semakin dibutuhkan.
Kita memahami bahwa COVID ini pandemi, penyakit ini menjadi permasalahan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. It's very nice that you raised the issue of saline design.
For subarachnoid hemorrhage and due to family history. So,
by doing their cataract, I'm going to fix that. One thing a bit different from what Ike said, actually, I don't like to do femto.
After COVID-19 patient to physical fitness.
Okay, 3, 2.
Sebuah kebanggaan bagi bangsa Indonesia yang sudah diinisiasi oleh FK UNER.
Glukosamin itu kita mengimport 95%.
But for our research part, the conventional microarray.
Di sini telah hadir Dr. Fadil Ahsan, MSc PhD dari Jerman.
Acneiform eruption atau
the acute hepatitis of unknown etiologi in East Java and Indonesia. Hari ini saya coba mengupdate beberapa informasi terkait